Greetings, everybody. I'm Amelia,
And I'm Tom.
and we are GoTel Communications coming to you from
Dayton,
beautiful
Ohio.
city of Dayton, Ohio, right? Okay,
And it's a joy to be with you today.
it is. All right, so our story is John 10. I think it's verses 1 through 10. Is that right, Tom?
Yes.
He's going to tell us a story.
So Jesus said to them, "Very truly, I tell you, whoever does not enter the courtyard of the sheep by the door is a thief and an insurrectionist. The one who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. And the doorkeeper opens the door for him, and the sheep hear his voice. And he calls all his own by name and leads them out. And when he has called out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers." Now, Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they didn't understand what he was saying. And then Jesus said, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are bandits and thieves and insurrectionists, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. Whoever enters through me will be saved, and they will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly."
All right, thank you, Tom. Okay, so this past week, if you're watching in real time, Tom and I had a road trip down to Birmingham, Alabama, and back. The occasion was a celebration of the life of Tom's cousin, Donald Boomershine, who died on Easter Sunday. And on the way down and on the way back, we worked on this story, not the whole time, but some of the time,
A lot
of the time. So one of the things we went round and round about was the translation of the word, which is in the NRSV is bandits. And first we decided, we're going to do insurrectionists. Then we decided, we're going to do bandits. You went with insurrectionists, but you want to talk about the translation issues there and why you went with insurrectionist.
Right. Well, the Greek word is leistes, and leistes is used in all of the Gospels to describe, to name those who were part of the Zealot revolution and the insurrection. And bandit is a term that is frequently used, and in the major translations is used for this. And the bandits were part of the insurrection movement, and they would steal from the rich in order to fund their revolt. So they carried out the revolution in 66 and drove out the Romans. And then the Romans came back in 68 under Vespasian. And then in 79, under Titus, they conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. And so the whole background of this story in relation to the Zealot war is lost if you only say bandit. So I decided that it is better to make clear that connection that John is making with the revolution, with the insurrection, and to translate it as is fully appropriate as the insurrectionists.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we, Tom, one of the times when Tom's going through the story in the car, he comes to the part about Jesus saying, "Do you understand this?" he turns to me and says, "Do you understand this?" I said, "Well, you've been explaining it to me, but it's pretty hard to understand what Jesus is getting at. And if you don't know, like the historical background of what happened, 40 years after Jesus, his life, then you really don't understand. So you want to explain? Well, maybe we can get at it by some of these other aspects. You kind of already talked about the war, the revolutionaries, insurrectionists / bandits, the zealots. It wasn't just the zealots, though, right?
Right. There were various factions, and the
Yeah.
zealots were one of the major factions. But it's the clearest and simplest term to use to describe the armies of the insurrection. And just to further explain this, John was writing and was telling this story sometime in the 90s. So it was some 15 to 20 years after the insurrection and the destruction of the temple. And so this is a story that has two levels. One level is the story being told about Jesus in 33 or so, when he was discussing these issues which are present throughout the Gospel of John. But in this case, I think the reference is clear, and is the only thing that makes sense of it, is to continue the two levels that were being pursued in the story of the man born blind, where it was about the man, but it was also about the Pharisees who had power then, and they only had power after the revolution.
Okay, so this story follows on the heels of the man born blind, right? Because that's chapter 9. So then Jesus is talking to the Pharisees.
Right.
So when he says, "Do you understand this?" he's asking the Pharisees if they understand.
Right.
Okay. As well as the audience.
Right.
So, all right. So again,
who are addressed as Pharisees, as members of the community of Israel in the aftermath of the war.
Yeah, all right. So now there's a reference early on. Well, the very first thing is those who don't come in by the door, but climb in by another way. Those are the ones who are the thieves and the bandits / insurrectionists / I have problems with the word insurrection because, I mean, just since January 6th, 2 years ago, we hear that word a lot, and it refers to a very specific event here in our country. And so so that's part of the problem. But in terms of what was going on then, it was an insurrection against who? Let's get that clear.
It was against the Romans. And so in 66, the armies of the Israelite rebellion drove out the Romans who had occupied the country. And so Israel was free of Roman domination from 66 to 68. In 68, Vespasian came back with an army,
Right.
and conquered Galilee and the outskirts in Judea. And then in 70, his son Titus was given command because Vespasian went to Rome to be made emperor. And so it was Titus then who led the Roman army in the conquest of the temple and of the destruction of the insurrection army.
Okay, so now let's back up to the question I had started to ask. What does a door refer to, and what does climbing in by another way refer to in that context?
Right. Well, I think that he makes clear that this is about the temple at the very beginning by naming it as the courtyard of the sheep. The courtyard was a reference to the temple, which had a large courtyard, and the courtyard of the sheep was then a reference to the courtyard of the temple. And during the insurrection, one of the major issues was that the insurrection army tried to control those who came in and went out, because thousands of people came into the temple to escape the Roman army. And that was the occasion for a major siege. And there were people who would try to get out, and they'd kill them. And they would
I think you told me that there were some other like reinforcements
right.
for the revolutionaries that climbed in by another way or something that didn't come through the
They
gate.
climbed in over the wall.
Yeah, okay, so that
and through the door, that is through the gate. So this is, I think, a clear description that John's listeners would have connected with the revolution.
okay. Well, all right. So Jesus then says, I am the door. And he talks about the sheep listening to him and not listening to the other ones. So are his sheep, what does Jesus mean by he's the door, and who are the sheep? And why don't some of them listen? Why don't some of them listen? Why don't they listen to the thieves?
Right. They don't listen to the thieves because they are leading them into the revolution and to participate in the war. Jesus was leading them out.
But who's the them? Who's the them?
Well, it's the followers of Jesus. It's the people.
It's not all the Judeans. It would be those who kind of believe in Jesus as a Messiah and were following him.
But it's also an invitation to anyone in the community of Israel who would follow Jesus and who would listen to his voice. And so the issue was, would they follow the shepherd or would they follow the bandits, the thieves,
The warriors,
the insurrectionists? And so for everybody who is hearing this story, this is an invitation to reflect on that decision that happened with the war, which was an enormous tragedy.
and in fact, hadn't most of Jesus's the followers of the way, as they called themselves, already left Jerusalem by the time of the war?
Well, we don't really know.
Okay.
There is a tradition that the followers of Jesus, in the temple at the time, or in Palestine at the time of the war, that they were given a divine sign to leave Jerusalem before the siege and to escape to Pella, which was a city on the other side of the Jordan. And so the story that refers to his leading them out and that they would go and find pasture and so on may have been understood by John's listeners as a reference to this escape from Jerusalem by the followers of Jesus, who then went to Pella.
Okay. Now, how do we know all the detail that we do know about the Jewish war and, what happened with the siege and all of that? What's the source?
The major source is Josephus. So his great book, The Jewish War, is our primary source of information about what happened in the war.
Okay, tell people just very briefly who Josephus was.
Josephus was a nobleman who was appointed as the general of the insurrectionists' army in Galilee. And so the first major battle in the reconquest of Judea by the Romans was in Galilee. And so the story is that Josephus, that it came down to, they were badly defeated, and he and 10 others from the army were the only ones who were left, and that they had gotten into a cave where they were protected, and that Josephus convinced them to cast lots and to kill each other until he got down to the last one, and he convinced him to surrender to the Romans. And then Josephus came out and pledged loyalty to Vespasian, and he became a primary supporter of the Roman army, and was constantly, especially during the siege, going around the walls to try to get people to surrender and not to be destroyed.
And then he wrote this book.
And then he wrote this book in the aftermath of the war.
Okay.
He was taken to Rome, and he had a villa in Rome, and was, a respected Roman citizen.
All right. I guess my last question is, what do we take from this in terms of spiritual nurture or understanding of the times, or if anything? I don't know. I don't quite know what to do with this story. How it's.
Oh, this is a story about following Jesus as the shepherd who brings life, rather than following the insurrection and following the various, the participants in and the whole style of the war.
Those who come to, what's that line? Come to rob, kill, and destroy? Something.
Right. So the choice was between the shepherd and those who were advocating the revolution, who Jesus characterizes as being those who steal, kill, and destroy. And that's what they did. They killed thousands of their own citizens during the siege.
That actually might be quite timely for today. In this country, we, look at what are people advocating?
Right. Well,
ways of life or ways of death.
Yes. And that was the choice that was made during the war. And Jesus, in this discourse, is reflecting on the decision that everybody had to make now, in the aftermath of the war, to believe in Jesus as the one to follow, rather than to follow the way of the zealots of the insurrection. Now, I need to be clear. This is an an interpretation of this discourse in John that is very distinctive. I've looked through all the major commentaries, and nobody makes the connection between this story and the war. And so it is also about Jesus as the shepherd of the sheep, and his leading the sheep into a safe place, and so it's a long metaphor, a figure of speech, and I think it makes by far the most sense when it is seen as addressing the choice that Judeans had to make in the aftermath of the war,
right,
as to whether to continue to support and be part of the reaction against the Romans, or whether they would follow Jesus in a way of peace.
right.
Of not
Okay, well, these folks aren't going on a 10-hour road trip with us, so I think we better sign off. We probably talk about this story well, we did talking about it for a long time. It's a really interesting story. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.
All right. Peace.
Peace.